Welcome to our journey. We're finding ourselves, we're finding you, and it is a journey to recover our heart. And we've been talking about how God has given us our brain and our heart to figure out who we are so that we can have relationship. And one of the things that God gives us in our heart are these 8 core feelings. And we've talked about this before. They are not the goal. They lead us into relationship. But for us to get the gift of every single one of these truths or feelings, we have to put in the work, the patience, the willingness, and the time. And so today, our guide Keith is going to walk us through the emotion of lonely.
So the truth of our hearts is lonely because you were made with a legitimate need to be known. And so there's a component about the gift of intimacy is into me see. But I can tell you information about me and a story about me, but if I don't include the truth of my expression of my emotions, then I haven't actually included me.
I've just learned objective truths.
You've learned some things about me. So there's a relational shift that happens when you see somebody bearing their chest, being voluntarily vulnerable and humbling themselves with you.
Lonely shows that need to be known, which so that gift is into me see. Yeah. Walk us through that.
Yeah. So there's 3 parts to intimacy. One is you know me and I know you. And the third part is to take into one's confidence. So when I know you and you know me, it means that I include not just the facts and information about me or my story, but I actually give expression to the feelings attached to that story. When I do that, I give me in the expression. That's why you know me. And when you feel that shift, you feel my sadness, you feel my hurt, then you know me. And then we take that into one's confidence, as in, it's like a vault. There's a front door to the vault of my confidentiality that I vow to you, commit to you that I won't ever use this information that you're giving me as a weapon against you in a fight. And likewise, there's a back door to the vault that you won't ever hear the information that you've given me in confidence from somebody else that I told your story to. It's not my story to tell others. So I hold that in confidence.
And this is the scary part of intimacy because we want safety.
Yes.
But you can't have both.
Yeah. And so after we've experienced hurt, our brain is doing its job of accurately predicting outcomes, forecasting a reoccurrence of pain. And so that guard begins to go up. And that guard, in my opinion, it's like it becomes a wall. And each of those bricks holding up the wall, it does keep you safe, but you can't have intimacy from the other side. You can have safety, and you got safety, but you can't have both. And so you have to lower that wall down in the vulnerability. And so I will only actually be known to the degree that I am willing to come out of the hiding from behind my wall of safety.
And with our 2 greatest needs, so lonely gets us to get out of that wall, to show that, hey, we're not okay, because our 2 greatest needs are to matter and to belong. And that's why loneliness is so powerful, because it gives us motivation to do those 2 things.
Yeah. So there's 3 kinds of loneliness. There is a loneliness for self, there's a loneliness for God, and a loneliness for others. And so in this loneliness for self, recovering this relationship with yourself, because what we find when we scoop back into our memories is something called toxic shame, and we're going to get to that later. But in that toxic shame, I have contempt for the way that I'm made. And that's what will lead me into isolation. Now, I might be alone, and it could be in isolation or it could be solitude. And they're 2 very different things. Isolation is when I'm trying to get away from the way that I'm made, trying to get away from my feelings. But solitude is I'm actually moving towards the introspection, towards self-examination, towards my loneliness with God. And you can be in relationship with others in your solitude as the Lord brings someone to mind, and then all of a sudden they text you or they call you. They don't know why, but you're connected in the spiritual realm.
Talking about how relationship and solitude, God came so he could have a relationship with us in the person of Jesus. And the religious people asked him, what is your greatest commandment? Because they're trying to trip him up, but it's so powerful because in that, he talks about really the isolation versus solitude. Can you kind of walk us through that?
So in that scripture, he says the first and greatest commandment, which is actually citing Old Testament, I believe in Isaiah, but hear, O Israel, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, with all of your strength, and all of your mind. And the second greatest commandment is like unto it, to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, on all those hang the law. On those two commandments hang the law. That's a visual illustration of the commandments were a scroll, and they were hung by these two first and greatest commands. Now, the first commandment, I love the Lord my God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. It's going to imply that I love myself already before I can love my neighbor as myself. So that relationship with myself comes from my relationship with God. And it starts with self-examination, where I find the truth of the doctrine of the depravity of man. Because in my flesh dwelleth no good thing. And I see my need, and I end up crying out for mercy.
When we were walking through this, you gave an example from your own life of how that happened.
Yeah, so in my childhood, I had a lot of benign neglect. I was the youngest of four, and the oldest one was 3. So at one time, my parents had 4 kids, and the oldest was 3. Whew. And there was not enough, and I was the runt of the litter. So I didn't ever feel like I belonged in my family, but I did belong with my friends. And that 6th grade spelling test that I did not pass, and my friends were going on to their accelerated spelling groups, and I was left behind. And I felt the worst experience, a reoccurrence of abandonment that I vowed to not feel again. I'd already lost my relationships with my family, but losing my friends wasn't an option. So after that, I began to cheat. Losing my friends and not belonging to them, I started making cheat sheets in the hard classes of like sophomore year in chemistry or physics or whatever, that it just wasn't an option. I needed them.
And so and for many of us, that's what happens is because we want to belong, we'll literally start crossing boundaries.
Absolutely.
And we were talking about that's why gangs or things like Hitler will say things like, well, how could those soldiers do those things? Because that need to belong becomes so powerful that we're willing to cross moral boundaries that we never thought possible because we so desperately want to know, do I matter?
Yeah.
Man, do I belong? We did not listen to our heart.
Yeah. And this gradual losing of self. And this is where the impairments start to come in. So the impairment of loneliness is called apathy. And hatred is not the opposite of love. Apathy is. The enemy, Satan, does not care. He's not full of hate. He's just full of apathy. He does not care. And it's an objectified heart that then can begin to objectify another. That's where the control response of isolation, of evil, comes in. So if my heart's already been discarded and objectified, that's from that place, then I can objectify and discard somebody else because I'm not valuing myself. Why would I value others?
And that's why the objectification, that's why the porn industry is so powerful, because it allows you to, I don't have to be lonely. I can go get my needs met here, and I don't have to have a relationship. I don't have to have intimacy. I'm fully in control. But the problem is that person is not real. And so you're making these connections to someone that doesn't exist, and then people become objects.
Yeah.
And that's where all sorts of evil can come from, because now you're no longer made in the image of God. You're just a thing.
Yeah. And the apathy, there's one key component. It's a very powerful and deceptive feeling. Apathy is like, you cannot reach me, I will not be touched. It's powerful. I'm taking this power that you need me and I don't need you. And it is deceptive. It's very tricky.
And so as we go through all these videos and we go through the emotion, again, the most important part is that self-reflection. Because that's what starts the work, the patience, the willingness, the time. You can watch these videos and you can do all you want, but if you're not willing to take the time and to reflect, you're never going to get there. So a great place to start, we recommend this book. It's a lot of the material that we've been discussing. And in each one of these chapters, they have these things of questions of reflection. And so our action step is I want to walk you through these questions. And the first one was, how much time do you spend alone? Do you find this time replenishing? Why is that important?
Well, it's going to define the difference between isolation and solitude. Like, I'm an introvert. I need to recharge in solitude so that I have something to give away if I have been able to get that time alone with the Lord.
The second question is, what is the difference between isolation and solitude? Would you describe your alone time as isolation or solitude? Number 3, think of a time when in your loneliness you longed for something, someone, or someplace. Describe it. And I think this is, we brought this up, and it'll probably be brought up a lot, is when we talk about these 8 feelings, most people will go, why are 7 of them negative? And a lot of us would say loneliness is a negative feeling, but it's not, because it makes you long for something. That's what our heart is for. It makes you long for something that can get better, or someone you miss. Number 4. What is your mind's picture of a person who feels lonely? Are you ashamed of feeling lonely? If so, what has led you to this belief? Number 5. What are you lonely for today? What is threatening you about acknowledging this loneliness? Can you speak into that? What do you think could be a fear of someone of feeling lonely?
Absolutely. You have to redefine vulnerability, because vulnerability and our negative definition of vulnerability is what strengthens the wall, that wall of safety. If you do not have vulnerability, then you will not take any risks towards being known. Your loneliness will just stew, and it will become apathy as you can't bear to feel the unfulfilled loneliness.
Number 6, what do you do to avoid feeling lonely? And I think it's so interesting because and I've been reading this book on our current generation, Generation Z, and they are the most connected generation because of Instagram, Snapchat, but yet they're the most lonely because they don't have intimacy. You can't get that there. So number 7, how do you fulfill your need for a relationship and your desire for intimacy? You can do so many things, but at the end of the day, we always want to remind you, loneliness, all these, they are tools to point you to the fact that you need relationship. So we want to remind you of that every video, that God absolutely loves you and He wants a relationship with you. And in that, you can start having a relationship with other people.